Former US President Donald Trump has been indicted again. How will this impact his presidential campaign? Hello, I'm Anand Naidu and this is The Heat. This week, a grand jury indicted former President Trump for a fourth time. Trump and 18 other co-conspirators were charged with violating the state of Georgia's Racketeering Act, bringing the total criminal charges to 91. Arrest warrants have been issued for Trump and his co-defendants. They have until August 25th to surrender for arraignment. We begin with this report from CGTN White House correspondent Nathan King.
It's turned my life upside down. I no longer give out my business card. I don't transfer calls. I don't want anyone knowing my name.
Moss is a former election worker in the U.S. state of Georgia. She was allegedly harassed by the Trump campaign on claims she committed election fraud in a bid to overturn the results of the 2020 presidential election. She was later cleared of any wrongdoing. Her experience makes up a small part of a 98-page indictment unsealed Monday night. It includes 13 felony counts against former President Trump and a total of 41 counts against 18 other individuals, which charges that Trump and his supporters in Georgia engaged in a criminal conspiracy to overturn the results of the presidential election.
The indictment alleges that rather than abide by Georgia's legal process for election challenges, the defendants engaged in a criminal racketeering enterprise to overturn Georgia's presidential election result.
The charges uses statutes normally reserved for organized crime syndicates. The potential crimes range from stealing poll data to trying to seat fake electors on January the 6th that could have delivered Georgia's 16 electoral college votes to Trump, not Joe Biden, who had legitimately but narrowly won the election in the state. Trump scrambled to overturn the results of the election, a moment encapsulated in the publicly released phone call between Trump and the Secretary of State for Georgia, who's responsible for overseeing elections, and who earlier this year gave testimony to the January 6th Congressional Committee.
So, look, all I want to do is this. I just want to find 11,780 votes, which is one more than we have, because we won the state.
Trump, of course, is fighting back, portraying himself as a martyr targeted by a partisan legal system. He's raising millions in campaign donations too. But there's one big problem for the former and potentially next US president, is that Georgia is charging him with state crimes. As president, he would not be able to pardon himself or shut down the investigation. Nathan King, CGTN, Washington.
To discuss this and more, let's bring in our guests. Joining us from Washington, D.C., Douglas Sloan is a political analyst and principal at the National Capital Strategy Group. Jacquie Luqman is the co-host of By Any Means Necessary on Radio Sputnik. Out of New York, Aaron Maté is a contributor to The Nation and host of Pushback with Aaron Maté on the Grayzone. And from Georgia, we're joined by Bill Crane. He is a political analyst and columnist. Welcome to all of you. Bill Crane, as I said, this was the fourth indictment against former President Donald Trump. He is now facing 91 criminal charges. And I think it was Fox News that did the arithmetic and said that if he is convicted on all of those charges, he would face something like a little over 700 years in prison. I think it was something like 716 years in prison. Now, these latest charges have to do with racketeering laws in the state of Georgia. And these laws, as our reporter just told us, are normally used to bring down organized crime figures like the mafia. Is this meant to portray Trump as the boss in an organized crime enterprise?
RICO, which is both a federal and state statute here, stands for Racketeer Influenced Corrupt Organizations. And Fonnie Willis, who is the prosecutor and the district attorney here in Fulton County, has used RICO as an example to demonstrate that teachers and principals in the City of Atlanta public school system conspired to feign and cheat and change test scores to inflate the test scores of the public school system in APS and receive millions of dollars in federal funding. This was several years ago. So yes, the statute was aimed and created at breaking up gang and mob-influenced activities, but it has been used in other settings like this one. But I think the bigger challenge for President Trump and his ongoing campaign, after the November 2020 general election, he and his team of lawyers, many of whom have since been disbarred, filed litigation in 70 different instances, and they won 0 times. Rudolph Giuliani has been disbarred in the state of New York and in the District of Columbia. Last week, another decision was handed down against Sidney Powell and a group of 5 other Trump lawyers who were fined $152,000, but still have their licenses to practice law. Lynn Wood, who is not indicted, but is one of those people who is very vocal in the state of Georgia, lives here and in South Carolina, relinquished his license to practice law, but his presence by not being indicted would indicate perhaps he's a witness for the prosecution. And when in Georgia we can televise these trials by the decision of the judge, and this judge, Robert McBurney, has televised a lot of his trials, the whole nation as well as the globe will be able to witness Mr. Trump, if he takes a stand, and a host of these others, 18 other indicted co-conspirators, face a RICO statute that only requires one of them, one of the 19, to be successfully prosecuted and found guilty on a particular charge, and then that charge, the RICO charge, would apply to all of the others indicted under that charge. So it's very difficult to see a path that Donald Trump doesn't end up with a handful of felony convictions, even if some of these charges are dropped, combined, or the sentencing is rolled down. It's very hard to see, with 91 felony indictments, a clean slate.
One other thing, Bill, and that is, I mean, Trump is the accused, but he's also a presidential candidate. This is the 4th indictment, as I said. Is this going to impact him seriously in any way?
In the general election, yes. In the Republican primaries, which are not yet underway, but will start with the Iowa caucuses in January and the polling now, in some respects, it's helping him. He has a loyal base. I would put it at about 30% of the GOP entire GOP base. It varies by state. He doesn't do as well here in Georgia as he does in some of our neighboring states, but it will not win a general election. Now, before the Joe Biden crowd starts to celebrate too much, Joe Biden's got his own challenges, which we may get to later on in this show.
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons you're not hearing a lot out of the White House about the most recent indictments.
Okay, Douglas Sloan, I mean, this, what we are seeing is as much a political case as it is a legal one, and there are those who support the former president, and even some who actually don't support the president, who say what we are seeing is a political hit job, a determined effort by the country's Department of Justice and its national police, the FBI, led by Biden appointees in the case of the Department of Justice, to lock up the leading opposition candidate before the election. What is your response to that?
I think that no man is above the law in this country. We live in the world's oldest constitutional republic, not by any stretch of the imagination, the oldest country, but the oldest constitutional republic, obviously built on a democracy model that exists on the planet, where we are all set by the same rule of law and the Constitution that we all must abide by, and no man is above it. We're looking at 4 different indictments, 91 charges. There's a potential 5th indictment that may be coming out of Arizona. I believe that the Arizona governor just approved for the AG to move forward with election fraud charges in Arizona, so that may be coming forward. He may be looking at over 100 charges. This isn't just corrupt DOJ, these charges are coming from the states as well. Donald Trump has proved himself to be, over the last since he came into office in 2016, a serial lawbreaker. And this is very serious. And in this country, no one is above the law. So no, absolutely not. This is not a matter of a corrupt DOJ trying to target the leader of the opposition. That would be silly. Quite frankly, Joe Biden's best chance at winning a re-election is running against Donald Trump, who is twice impeached, co-conspirator, 4 times indicted candidate who may be out on bail when he's running for office. I believe that we're looking at some of these court dates. The one in Georgia, which looks to be the most serious, is right before Super Tuesday on March 4th. So no, absolutely not. This is not the work of the Justice Department. Unfortunately for Mr. Trump and for the Republican Party, the chickens have come home to roost, and we are looking at a slew of indictments like the speaker just before me said. I don't see how he's going to get off of from all of these.
Okay, let me go to Jacquie Luqman. Jacquie, great to have you with us. I want to start with something that Douglas just said, that nobody in the United States is above the law. Do you buy that?
If no one in the United States was above the law, then Donald J. Trump would have been fingerprinted, mugshotted, perp walked. And at this point, with this latest indictment with 19 felony charges against him in the 4th indictment, if he were just a regular person like, say, Jacquie and Luqman, he would have been remanded into custody as a flight risk. His passport would have been revoked. All these things that regular people endure when they face the justice system, regular people whose name is not Donald Trump, who were not the former president, who are not filthy rich people, all these things that regular people get subjected to in the justice system, Donald Trump doesn't get any of that treatment. He's given 10 days to voluntarily surrender himself, and he, supposedly committed this horrendous crime, or these horrendous crimes, which I absolutely believe he did, and he should certainly answer for his obvious attempt to overturn an election. But the idea that no one in this country is above the law is absolutely ridiculous, since every president could be tried for war crimes. By bombing people for no reason in some other country, killing civilians repeatedly, the Department of Defense not reporting it, covering it up, and it comes out later. All of the many coups and interventions the United States has carried out in other countries because this government has not liked the leaders that other people have chosen. And it comes out later, maybe 10 years, maybe 15, maybe 20, that the reason the American people were told by president after president after president that we had to intervene militarily in this other country was because of these awful things this leader was doing. And then we find out later that all of it was a lie.
Right.
From Vietnam up to now. So the idea that no one in this country is above the law, there's no way you can look at the political system and the people in it and believe that's true.
Aaron Mate, I want to get your very brief response, if I can, on this belief that no one is above the law in the United States. And I know you've done a lot of work on this. Haven't there been leaders in the intelligence community in the United States who've appeared under oath in the United States Congress for hearings who have not told the truth?
Yeah, James Clapper told Congress that the NSA was not collecting the data of Americans through mass surveillance. That was a lie. He never faced any punishment for it. John Brennan's CIA spied on the Senate when the Senate was investigating the CIA torture program. And not only was John Brennan and the CIA not prosecuted for spying on the Senate, but nobody was really prosecuted for committing torture on people. So those are examples of people very much being above the law.
Right, and there was also someone from the CIA who destroyed evidence of torture and was never charged. But Aaron, I want to get back to what's happening right now. There was a poll which has just been published by AP Nork, And it says that 53% of Americans approve of the charges in the January 6th case, and 51% believe Trump violated the law in Georgia. What do those numbers tell us?
It's a very polarized, divided country. And my worry is that actions like this will continue that divide. I think it's a tough case. Certainly what Trump did, in my opinion, was very reckless and baseless, and he did cause a lot of damage, and he should be held to account for that. I thought impeachment was a good remedy for that. I'm just not sure if this is criminal, because people do have the right to challenge elections. I personally really wish the Democrats had done a better job at challenging the 2000 election when George W. Bush was declared the winner, even though there was so much controversy about what happened in Florida. And in 2016, after Trump won, there were Democrats who tried to make the case that Russia had hacked the election and therefore the election was stolen, that he was an illegitimate president. That's what Hillary Clinton said. Stacey Abrams in Georgia, she challenged the governor when she lost in that race, and I supported that. So now, you could argue that what Trump did is beyond the pale and fair enough, and I guess I'm not convinced yet. Certainly what he did was reckless, it was baseless, it did damage. But you look at the indictment and you see things like Trump sending out a tweet asking people to watch a TV network that he liked, One American News, this conservative network, that is an act in furtherance of a conspiracy. And holding a meeting is an act in furtherance of a conspiracy.
Right.
Okay, I mean, it's plausible, but I also think we might be going too far here.
Okay, just one other thing on that poll that I cited, Aaron, and that is it also showed that 17% of people have any confidence in the Department of Justice. That's 17%. Even 26% of Democrats feel that way, and Republicans overwhelmingly feel the Department of Justice and the National Police Force, the FBI, are politicized. That figure is 7%. How do you see it?
Well, so many different constituencies in this country, no matter what spectrum, what part of the spectrum you're on, have grounds to feel that way. Everybody remembers the Wall Street crisis, and all the bankers who gave us that crash were never held to account. And in general, the rich and powerful get off scot-free for their crimes. And then if you're a Republican, especially if you're a Trump fan, you have ample grounds to distrust the DOJ because you saw your president, your candidate who you voted for and elected, being framed as a Russian agent and investigated for multiple years. And that investigation did consume his presidency. I think Republicans rightly saw that as a weaponization of government. And people of color who have been abused by police obviously have ample grounds to distrust the justice system and the lack of accountability there. So there's no shortage of grievances for anybody, no matter where you are in the U.S., to distrust the DOJ, unless you're among the rich and powerful.
Right. Bill Crane, if we look at the numbers, neither Trump nor Biden are popular with their respective bases. And many Republicans feel that Trump has, in fact, weakened the party. Let's get the view from someone I'm sure you may know, the former Georgia Lieutenant Governor Jeff Duncan. This is what he had to say. Let's listen.
Donald Trump did his most damage in Georgia. He sucked the soul out of the Republican Party here. He's sucked the morality out of the Republican Party, the fiscal responsibility out of the Republican Party. He sucked our winning percentage out of the Republican Party. He's taken everything from us, and it is our turn to take it back.
So, Bill, do you agree with that analysis?
Yes. I mean, we had 2 U.S. Senate race seats up, which never happens because senators are spaced apart. And because of the death of Johnny Isakson, we had an interim senator having to seek a 6-year term. So we had 2 Republican senators up for re-election in the same election that Donald Trump lost. One of those 2 senators, David Perdue, outpolled Donald Trump at the top of the ticket by 44,000 votes. He lost several 100,000 votes in that runoff election, which was the day after the certification in Washington on January the 6th. And on January the 5th, the Trump campaign was running ads, not asking people to vote or to absentee vote or to drop their vote off in a ballot box, but to call members of Congress to protest the certification of the results that Joe Biden would win the office of President of the United States. 2 Senate seats in that election cost the Republican Party the majority. And almost every candidate, with the exception of Burt Jones, our current lieutenant governor, endorsed by Donald Trump in the 2020 elections, in the 22 elections, pardon me, lost. And didn't just lose slightly. That same Senator David Perdue lost in a primary to our incumbent governor, Brian Kemp, 75-25. The down the slate Republican nominees that Mr. Trump was supporting, in most cases, lost in the Republican primaries, 3-1. So yes, in Georgia and in other states, there are Republicans as well as independents who wish Donald Trump would just pack it up and go home to Mar-a-Lago.
Douglas Sloan, let's talk about some of the things that President Biden has been saying. He is touting Bidenomics, as it's become to be known. And that's a bit of a controversial term. Some people don't like it, some like it, but it refers to his economic policies. And if you look at what's happened, he says, I've brought inflation down, I've strengthened the employment market and staved off a recession for the time being. But on the other hand, the country's credit rating has just been downgraded. And now there's also reports that bank credit ratings around the country may be downgraded as well. And the president's approval ratings, according to Reuters, remain stagnant at around 40%. People, and that 40% reason given by Reuters is that people are still deeply concerned over inflation. And if you look at the polls on the presidential race, he's tied with Donald Trump at 40, I think it's 46 points each. How does one explain all of this, the seemingly contradictory views that we're getting?
Thank God for Donald Trump. And if I could just very quickly go back to what the speaker after me said, I never said that people couldn't get away with crime or get away with breaking the law, but that no man is above it. And regarding Trump being fingerprinted and getting a mugshot, well, the Fulton County Jail in Georgia said that they mugshot and fingerprint everybody. So it looks like former President Trump will undergo a fingerprinting and a mugshot. So, and I don't expect him to get away with all these charges. So again, I don't feel that Trump will be above the law. Politically, thank God, I mentioned it earlier, thank God that Trump is running. I don't portend to proclaim Joe Biden to be a perfect candidate, although we have seen he's running around right now talking about the Inflation Reduction Act that's given millions of dollars in tax credits, and also has provided the country with hundreds of thousands of jobs. This is our jobs president. Biden has been doing good with that. He doesn't quite, and no president has complete control over the economy regarding inflation. Sometimes there are different machinations that are out of the president's control. He is deadlocked with former President Trump.
Right.
If this were another candidate, maybe Biden wouldn't be doing so well. The fact that we have a flawed potential Republican nominee is working in Biden's favor. Yeah. And, at this point, there's not too much more that Biden can do regarding, we're seeing jobs, inflation is coming down. Some of these things are out of his control. But, thank God he's running against President Trump, who may be indicted sometime, may be convicted sometime next year.
Okay. Jacquie, you want to respond to that?
For the 90% of the newly unemployed people in the last quarter, for the newly unemployed people in the last quarter, not 90% of them were Black. I wonder how they feel about how well the economy is doing and how low inflation is. I wonder all of those people who, those thousands, hundreds of thousands of jobs, most of which were part-time, gig work, less than full-time jobs, low-wage service jobs. So people have to still work 2 and sometimes 3 jobs to make a living. I wonder how they feel about how well Bidenomics are doing. Whenever economists in this country talk about how well the economy is doing, they mean that from the perspective of businesses. They do not mean that from the perspective of working class and poor people, and how more and more people are struggling to make ends meet, despite all of these fantastic jobs report, which the jobs report is never reported to explain how many of those jobs are less than full time, how many of those jobs are gig work, which means they're not employees, they're independent contractors, so they have no benefits. They don't tell the truth about the unemployment numbers. There is so much misinformation about the actual facts, the material conditions of people in this country behind these quarterly jobs report, that it creates this false cheerleading moment for a presidential administration, Democrat or Republican, that really are not doing anything to address the real material conditions of people in this country. And millions of people are suffering from low wages, overwork from having to work 2 and 3 jobs just to afford a roof over their heads. People can't have, they don't make enough money to save $400 for an emergency. The economy is not doing well. It's just that the propaganda about Bidenomics is really good.
Erin Mate, to the point that Jacquie makes about the fact that there is still a lot of poverty in the country, that, as she just pointed out, for the 90% of people who are recently unemployed, this doesn't look very good. It's also led to questions right now on the part of many Americans who are asking about the seemingly limitless, endless amount of money that Biden is providing for the Ukraine conflict at a time when the country faces the kind of problems that Jacquie was talking about. I mean, there's serious homelessness in some cities. 40 million Americans live in poverty. The child poverty rate is 15%. Do you think these things would become more of an election issue?
They should, because these are the issues that actually impact people's lives. And one of my concerns about these endless courtroom dramas that we've been facing the last 6 years in the Trump era, with Russiagate and then his impeachment over Ukraine and then his second impeachment and then all these different court cases he's facing now, is that all these real issues are sidelined and we're just focused on interpretations of the law. And you turn on the news and it's all legal analysis, because all these are basically complicated legal matters, but not real issues that impact working people. So they should be issues if the election and democracy were actually reflective of people's concerns. But we don't live, I think, in a representative democracy where, the representatives actually are there to push for priorities that help people. They're there to represent their own interests and that of their donors. And I think, accordingly, we're not going to see these issues being discussed. And by the way, there's also a new study saying that homelessness is at a record level in the U.S. And you contrast that with how much money is being poured into Ukraine for this proxy war. And then you see the disaster in Hawaii, where Biden's saying we're going to give everybody $700. Well, why are we only giving people $700 when we have an endless supply of money for a prolonged proxy war inside of Ukraine? And so it's unfortunate, but we don't have right now politicians who are really making that connection.
Okay, and that is where we have to leave it. Thank you to all of you for being with us. And that is it for this edition of The Heat. I'm Anand Naidu in Washington, D.C.